have kind of always dealt with anxiety to some extent, usually things I could get through, talk myself through, very few panic attacks. But then about 6 months ago, postpartum really hit home, and I found myself just in that constant fight or flight. My heart was always racing. I wasn't sleeping well at night. I lost appetite. I just got to the point in my journey that it was going to be easier not to be here anymore than it would be to continue feeling the way I was feeling. So in that, I was having weekly panic attacks, and things I'd been able to do to cope previously were not working any longer. I was spending time in prayer and things that I'm like, okay, if I just do this, I'll get through it. And when your hormones and things are adjusting postpartum, it's not just something you can just get through because your body is kind of playing against you at that point. So I had the open conversation with my husband and my best friend about the thoughts I was feeling, and not so much wanting to die, but to not feel the way I was feeling. I just knew that if I was going to be the mom that she deserved, that I needed to be here, first of all, and that I couldn't be the mom that she deserved if I was in my current state. So I just said, I have to let someone know. I've grown up in church, and a lot of times people will just think that, oh, if I pray hard enough, that this will go away. And so my point in my faith was I didn't feel like just praying about it was going to get me kind of to the other side, and that I really felt that God was calling me as like, you have to take some steps and you have to do some work. So I had called my doctor and was open with him. I ended up spending a few hours at Cox North, just getting that separation and getting that little bit of a break that I needed mentally, and started on some medication that very day. Since then, I've kept up with my doctor and been adjusted on some medication. I'm also in therapy as well, which has been tremendous for my mental health and using coping skills. I think that sometimes those are good body signals and can be good. The fight or flight mechanism is a great one when it's for fight or flight, but not a great one when you're trying to sleep at 2:00 in the morning. So I know that some of those signals are there because that's how we were created. So it's a lot to unload on people, and I'm in the middle of 7 children, so I unloaded on all of them and all my siblings and my parents. Having more people pray for you and check in on you has been super powerful for me. So all my family knows the struggles I've been going through. For me, I feel like it strengthened my faith. And it didn't mean I had less faith because I got help. And I know that my faith is going to grow in a place where I can be healthy and open and honest. And if that means I need to go talk to somebody once every other week to get some coping skills, and if I need to take some medication to regulate the things going on in my body, to be number one, my best self for me, but then also for my family and for my community, because if I'm not feeling my best self, I'm not a help to others. It can change my dynamic of my relationship with God. I feel like just going from that, oh, I know he's here and I know, but when you really hit those hard times and you're able to see like he really is here, and he's gonna help you through it. Where I am now is night and day difference than where I was 6 months ago, and the things I was feeling before I opened up and was vulnerable. and decided I can't do this by myself, and that I need some help.
It's just kind of, as kids get older, they kind of seem to try to spend more time away from the parents. And I think a lot of that sometimes can be the parents' fault, you know what I mean? Because, we get involved with our little phones and stuff too. He was starting to not want to go to school and stuff. That was hard to understand. That was hard to put my head around. And he would go and hide in the bathroom all day at school. And man, you get to wondering, like, okay, is he being bullied? And I know now, now you know a lot of things now that you didn't before, but I understand now that he was struggling, mentally. With what, I don't know. I've heard from several people that gets really dark, going through the counseling and then him stopping the counseling because we thought he was doing better, and he said he was doing better, didn't want to go to counseling anymore. And okay, cool, we're on the right track. Monday on May 10th, I got up at 4 o'clock and noticed his window was open in his room and he was gone. As a parent, you're thinking all kinds of things. I knew he was on his bike, so I thought, well, maybe the chain came off or he fell somewhere. So I spent about an hour in our neighborhoods, all the neighborhoods, just driving around, and nothing. And so I went back home, and at that time, my wife had called the Republic Police, and so I finally got a call from them, hey, meet us here, we want to talk to you. And you just kind of know at that point, your heart kind of sinks a little bit, and you're like, oh gosh, yeah, he took his life. There's times where I want to dwell on what I could have done, or I think about, what he was thinking about right before, you know what I mean? Because I know I had texted him, so, and I had to ask my friend that's the sheriff, but he said his phone was laying on his chest. He had laid down to do it, and it's just like, wow, So I'm just hoping that he read that, just so it was my last I love you. The entire community of Republic was reaching out, and it was so much, And that first week was hard because you're reliving everything over and over. And I didn't get much sleep, and I still do it, but you just felt like you were gonna walk into his room and he'd be there. You know what I mean? Like, just waiting for him to come home. Prayer is so important. Finding your little quiet place by yourself and saying a prayer and believing, I think, I have a lot of faith. Jesus is leading the way. He's always there for the ones that are really hurting, brokenhearted. Man, I feel it. You know what I mean? Like, I know, like, if I start crying and thinking about Tristan or whatever, it's like, boom, hey, I've got you. You know what I mean? I feel that, man. You know what I mean? As a human being, as we are in this earthly world, you have the thoughts all the time, like, okay, well, what if? What if I would have done this, or what if I would have done that? And, I've learned over time, it's like, no, I can't do that, because that in itself takes you to a really, really dark place. Because the parent doesn't want to feel like they've been a failure. And it's like, you haven't been. People need to stop thinking that. I just think it's really important that people understand how worthy they really are. They just don't understand it for what reason. The weight of the world's on them. They want to fit in, they want to look a certain way, and it's like, why? Like, God made you different than anybody else. Why do you want to look like somebody else? Why do you, it's like, you are special. You're one of a kind. I don't know, man. It's such a hard thing to deal with, a hard issue to deal with, suicide and mental health, and because nobody wants to talk about it, but we have to talk about it. We have to. Statistics are all over the place that show that, the percentage of death rates go down big time the more we talk about it. Because it's like, don't be afraid to reach out, you know what I mean? I'm sitting here thinking about it. It's like it's everything Jesus would do for these people, lifting them up, loving on them, not pushing them to the side because they're different or they act different or they look different, or, you know what I mean? It's like he loved everybody. I keep going back to that song, and it's like,
hey everyone, my name is Trey. I'm a part of the team here at North Point. I just wanted to say thank you for joining with us. Now, if this is your first time or if you've been with us for a minute, I just want to say we have a few ways to connect with you, and one of them is the chat room. Now, that's on Facebook, YouTube, or our online platform. You can connect with us there to where we'd be able to have someone to be able to connect with you. You can share a little bit about who you are, maybe where you're from. If you have a prayer request, you can send it there. You can also maybe even tell us how you had one of your snow days and what you did, maybe with your family or maybe with some friends. Maybe you stayed in. We would love to hear about it. So we have a few things coming up in a second. One of them is worship, where we're going to be able to sing some praises to God. So we're excited to join with you on that. We'll have a message right after that where we're going to be having a new series. So we're very excited. And then following that, we'll have some next steps for you. So we're about to join in with worship. We'll see you in the chat room.
Good morning.
I thought I might be the only one here. The roads are slick. Yeah. It's great, but we got some other crazy people out here.
Come on, yeah, we do.
All right, and I like that jersey.
Thanks, bro. Hey, Marks, I'm be honest with you. I got face paint, and all my years of playing football, I've never worn face paint.
Okay, I can see that.
I'm ready. I'm ready to suit up. I'm waiting on Andy to call. Like, yo, real, come on, man.
It's just a 3-hour drive.
Right, that's it. That's it.
Quick. I like it. Well, hey, if we haven't met yet, my name is John. I help out as campus pastor around here.
And I'm Terrell. I help out with the students here.
I like it, and this isn't just Terrell, student director. This is, in case you didn't know, Terrell's on the radio this past week. This is 96.5 Terrell, okay? This is business owner, CrossFit enthusiast, but most important,
come on,
student director.
Yes, most important. I love hanging out with your students every Sunday and Wednesday and just providing a safe place just for them to find and follow Jesus. So one of our past Wednesdays, I actually asked the students, I was like, hey, what is one thing that is keeping you from going all in with God? And I'm gonna read you some of the responses that I got from the students. One student said, not letting go when things need to be let go. Another student said, isolating myself from him and not opening up to him with my problems. Another one said, my anger and the way I treat other people.
Yeah, well, and I'd say those aren't just student things that hold students back from following Jesus. I think those are also like very human things that all of us would say, hey, maybe that there's something today that's getting in the way of you going all in, right?
Yeah, hey, but Mark, check this. So I also had a student not too long after and was like, hey, I'm glad that you gave us this opportunity to do that. Because what I told him, I was like, hey, write it down and come leave it at the feet of Jesus. And they were like, hey, I will no longer let this get in the way of me having a relationship with Jesus. And it was huge.
I like that. And here's what I'd say. I'd challenge all of us to do that same thing. What's that thing that we came in here with that maybe we're ready to let go of? And maybe this is an opportunity to say, okay, what do I need to set down right now to be fully present and engaged in this moment? I think it's gonna be pretty impactful if you do that. Would you stand with me? I wanna let you know, we picked out a couple songs on purpose that we think would be helpful for you on your faith journey. I think this is a great moment, a great environment to say, okay, how do I just, let me forget about everything else that's going on today. Let me take a moment, let me be present. And I think you're gonna experience something. I think I think Jesus is gonna speak to you today, and if we allow it. So, band, you ready? You guys ready? Let's do this.
Let's do it.
Who am I at the highest king would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me his love for me. There's a grace when the heart is undefined. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the water, holding back the seas. And should I ever be reminded of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden. Who died for me? There is another in the fire. All my dead left for dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. the joy from every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
Jesus, we thank you so much for this morning. God, thank you for bringing us here to learn about you and experience you. Even if we don't know what we're doing here, God, I just pray that you lead us in this moment and lead us in this morning, God. You're here. You brought us here for a reason. God, I just pray that we open our hearts to you. Thank you so much for today. Thank you for these people in this room. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, guys, thank you so much for worshiping with us. You can have a seat. Today we're going to kick off our new series called Chasing the Ring. Preston is going to kick it off for us. Yeah, maybe. Not all jokes planned. That's okay. Check out this video.
Crowd silent now, as opposed to when the Saints have the ball. Oh, look at this run. What a run. Marshawn Lynch still on his feet. Has blockers now. He's dancing his way for the touchdown.
Well, good morning. So glad that you're here. Obviously, I'm not Jeremy Johnson. If this is your first time with us and you're like, hey, I've been watching online and you're not the guy online, he is actually, I don't know where he is. He's somewhere vacationing with his family, but we're glad that he's able to do that. If you're with us in Nixa, thanks for joining us. My name is Preston, and I'm the spiritual formation pastor here at North Point. And I want to tell you, we're doing this series called Chasing the Ring. We're lining it up with the Super Bowl and the ring involved. If you didn't get that, I'm trying to explain it for people like me that aren't like devoted football watchers. And then this is what I realized. I'm wearing orange when I should be wearing red. Now, let me explain myself, okay? This is a safe place for people to find and follow Jesus. It's a safe place for Bengal fans. I'm not one of them. I'm a Chiefs fan. I just don't shop regularly for new vests and new clothes. So, this was a mistake. I accidentally wore this. If you're like, I tuned you out and then I saw the color, okay. But if you're a Bengals fan, we're very glad that you're with us as well. And if the Chiefs don't get into the Super Bowl, it's gonna make this whole teaching series awkward, isn't it? We're just gonna tear down up there. We're Chasing the Ring. We'll make it about Valentine's Day and proposals. I don't know what we'll do. We'll do something fun. But we are jumping into a story that is commonly referred to as the prodigal son story. Now, you may or may not have heard the prodigal son story before, but if you haven't, let me just catch you up the way that I caught my daughter up on this story, okay? I have two daughters, a 10-year-old, her name's Piper, and a 7, about to turn 8 years old, named Brennan. And I was sitting on the couch, and Piper, at 10 years old, is shopping on Amazon next to me, okay? She's scrolling. She has no money, and on that computer, our card is not tied to anything on the Amazon account, but she's scrolling, and I sat down and I said, Piper, have you ever heard the prodigal son story? And she said, yeah. And then she started telling me a story out of the Old Testament. Well, the prodigal son is in the New Testament, and Jesus tells the stories. I said, no, that was close, but that's not the one. And so I started telling her, I said, here's the story. Jesus tells this story about this father who has 2 sons. There's an older son and a younger son. And the younger son goes to the father and says, Dad, whatever I'm gonna get when you die, whatever inheritance I'm gonna receive, I want it now. In fact, I think that you've been holding out on me. I wanna go live my life, and I wanna live my life without you. And the father says, okay, divides all of his money and gives it to the younger son. The younger son runs away, and he goes and squanders, and I use that word, and Piper's like, what does squanders mean? And I'm like, I don't know, it's in the King James somewhere. No, he goes and wastes the money. And then he's sitting down with the pigs one day and realizes, man, even the people my dad hired are treated better than this. And so then he's like, how am I gonna go back home? Maybe I could go back home as a hired servant. I can go back home. I don't even need to go back home as a kid. I can go back home as a hired servant. And so then he goes back home, and he has a whole speech prepared. And then the father runs to him, and the father embraces him and brings him in and throws a big party. And I said, and then there's an older son, because there's 2. There's an older son, and the older son is mad because he's like, wait, I've never gotten a party, and I've stayed here. I never ran away. And Piper is also an oldest child, said, yeah, that's not fair. I'm like, what's not fair? And she's like, it's not fair that the younger son needed to at least get grounded, right? And grounding in our house means no sweets, no TV, and no friends for whatever length of being grounded. And I was like, why? And she goes, because he ran away. He ran away and wasted his money. Did he bring any of the money back? And I'm like, probably not. That's the word, squandered. It's all gone now. And she said, yeah, that's not fair. He at least needs to be punished. To which I wanted to ask her, like, Piper, do you think when mom and dad die, Brennan's going to squander all of our wealth? But I didn't. The answer would probably be yes. But she just said, this isn't fair. The story is kind of offensive. It's not just offensive to Piper. If I'm honest, there's parts of it that's offensive to me, and we'll jump into what those parts would be. The people who are listening, the story that Jesus tells is so offensive. Some people who study the Bible, called commentators, they've actually written about saying this story might have been the catalyst that kind of propelled Jesus to death, because Jesus explains God in a lens, it's so upside down. He talks about God in a way that nobody's ever heard of God. All the worldly systems and religious systems, they don't talk about God this way. And Jesus talks about God in a way that if Jesus were right, it would undo everything. And it would give a chance for anyone and everyone at any point and everywhere to come to God. And that was highly offensive to them. And in fact, if you ever read this story in the Bible, which we will read it in the Bible today, but if you're reading it in like a Bible that you're holding, there's a section heading that says the prodigal son, but that's not a good section heading, because how many sons were there? 2. There are 2 sons, and both sons are lost. The youngest son is lost because he's on this road to, I'm going to be totally fulfilled, and because of self-discovery. Don't hold me back. I'm going to discover myself. And he's lost, has no relationship with the father. But the older son has no relationship with the father based on self-righteousness. Self-discovery, self-righteousness, neither have a deep, true, transparent, life-changing relationship with the father in the story. There's 2 sons. Both are lost. In fact, it's so revolutionary. This story that we're going to jump into is so revolutionary. It was back in his day, and if you've heard it, maybe you've heard it 1,000 times, you're like, it's not revolutionary to me. I've heard this a million times. But it was so revolutionary to the people who heard it that for the first 200 years, because this is the type of God that Christians believed in, the first 200 years after Jesus' death, Romans wouldn't even call people who follow Jesus Christians or religious. They wouldn't call them religious. They would say they kind of have an anti-religion. Like, this is not really, we're not used to the type of God they follow and the things that they do, because they started following the God that Jesus talks about. And I don't think, if you're here and you're searching for God and you're going, I don't know what he looks like, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how do we get through to a clear picture of God and all stuff. But let me just, a little spoiler alert here is I think that the clearest revelation we have of who God is in Jesus. Because Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen God. He says elsewhere, he said, I don't say or do things that God hasn't told me to say or do. And then Jesus comes back from the dead, and you're like, well, if you conquer death, I should probably listen to you. If you stay down, I don't have to listen to you. You come back, I'm going to listen to you. So everything he says and does is a reflection of God. So when he tells you a story about this is who God is, we should pay attention more to him than anyone else. He starts these stories. He actually tells 3 stories in Luke chapter 15, and he starts it this way. I have verse 1 and 2 here in your notes, but it says this: Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. And the reason we start here is Luke, the author of this chapter, is saying, he's telling you who Jesus is talking to: tax collectors and probably prostitutes and sinners, just people who are so fascinated by the person of Jesus. And then Pharisees, who were in charge of the religious system of the day. And he's talking to both. And the story we jump into, he wraps up his entire audience in these 2 characters. Some of his characters, some of the audience would be like, yeah, I'm like the younger son. And some of the audience would be like, how dare you talk about us like we're the older brother? And he does. And surprise, surprise, he does get crucified, okay, for these kind of stories. So let's jump into verse 11. Verse 11, Luke chapter 15 says, this is the story. Jesus continued, and we're not going to read the whole story today because we're going to take about 3 weeks to go through this whole story, but we're going to read the first bit of it. Jesus continued, telling these stories. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered, means wasted, okay, there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. And he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you.'" This is the word prodigal. This is what it means. Prodigal means spending money or resources freely and recklessly, wastefully extravagant. That's what the word means. The story of the prodigal sons actually comes after 2 other stories. Remember I said Luke started by saying, here's the people Jesus is talking to. Well, Jesus actually tells 2 stories before this, and quickly here are the stories. One is about a shepherd who had 100 sheep and he lost one of his sheep. And the shepherd goes and leaves the 99 to find the 1 sheep, and he grabs the sheep, brings it back to the fold, and then he beats the sheep and he shaves the sheep. No, it doesn't do any of that. He goes and finds the sheep and brings the sheep back into safety. And then he said, and then there's a story about a woman who had some coins. I don't know if you're a coin collector. Apparently she was. She had some coins. She lost one of her coins. And she flips her house upside down to find this coin. I mean, she is flipping over chairs. She's panicking in a way, when you're like, where have I lost my keys? That kind of panic. She's like, where have I lost my coin? She found her coin. And then she calls the neighborhood and the community. She says, we're going to have a party. And they're going, why are we going to have a party? Because I found my coin. Now, pause. I'm thinking like the party probably costs more than 1 coin, okay? If you think about it. But bottom line, she's going to have a party because something that was lost is now found. And then he says, and then there's a father who has 2 sons. And what you start to see is the common denominator is this fierce, unrelenting, loving, grace-filled character in each story that says, I will do everything I can to embrace the thing that was lost. I'll do everything I can. And the story is about God. Now, what it's doing is, again, it's starting to tip whatever view you had of God, whatever you thought you had of God when you came in here. There's however many people there are here and in Nixa and listening online, there's probably that many different little nuances of views of God. And Jesus is trying to say, here's what God is like. He's like this. And in that, saying that, it makes us ask a few questions, okay? So I'll just let you into some of the questions I asked. Here's one of them. Why do we run from God? If this is what God's like, why do we run from him? Why would I run from someone who is so full of grace and forgiveness? Why would I run from someone who is constantly thinking about me and I'm on their mind, even if they're not on my mind? Why would I run from this person? And I think it's because we pick up along the way some really bad, sloppy representations of God, okay? Our neighborhood that we live in, some of you live in the same neighborhood, so you'll know what I'm talking about. Our neighborhood will find any excuse we can to party and throw like a celebration for people. So if someone's birthday, oh great, when are we going to get together? Who's making the cake? If it's like Christmas, okay, where are we having the white elephant exchange? If it's New Year's, if it's 4th of July, we just love hanging out with each other. If it's January or February and it's above 50 degrees, we're like calling, are you going to the driveway with your kids? Yes, we'll be there in just a minute. Order pizza. It's like whatever we can do. Our neighborhood does this, gathers and celebrates. So naturally, Halloween comes around, and I know talking about Halloween in church is like, ooh, kind of taboo, but it's not the devil's birthday. But Halloween comes around, And there's a tradition in our neighborhood where the kids will dress up, and then it's a costume parade. They'll dress up and they'll walk around. We'll start at the pool, and then they'll go up to the driveway and they'll get candy, and then they'll make as many rounds as they can before it gets dark, that sort of thing. Typically, it's mostly the kids who dress up, okay? But my wife and I, we wanted to participate this year. I forgot that was happening this night. And I get home, and Lisa, my wife, is dressed as Black Widow from one of the Marvel movies, and like a full-blown costume. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember we got that. And then Piper, my daughter, is dressed as Shuri, a character from Black Panther. I'm like, oh, we're going Marvel theme. Brennan's dressed up, and so I'm like, I don't have a costume. And now I try, even as I tell the story, I try not to get offended at what the next line that Lisa said was. But she said, you can go, and she wasn't meaning offensively, it's just an easy costume to throw out. I know that, I believe that. She goes, you can go as Fat Thor, which is a character in one of the movies, okay? It is when he kind of lets himself go, and he's sad he's missing his friends. Thor, this god, little g god of thunder and lightning and stuff. And so that is actually a character, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I can go as Thor. I can't go as Thor. I'll go as Fat Thor. So we went and we got a beanie, and we taped this Barbie hair in a beanie, and I'm like, I look terrible. I look terrible. And we put a hoodie on and then a robe over it, and then stuffed a pillow under my shirt, and then Piper gave me her Lego Thor's hammer, and I walk out of the house like, nobody's gonna know. I look like a slob. That's all I look like. And guess what? Everybody's like, who are you? I'm like, oh, I'm Fat Thor. And they're like, oh, I kind of see it. I'm like, you don't have to say I see it. It would be better if you said, I don't see it at all, Preston. But, oh, I kind of see it. I'm Fat Thor. No one knew who I was. And then they try to act like they did. And it was sloppy, last minute, just whatever you can, just pile it on and try to kind of resemble. This is what we do with God, is we're going through life, and we pick up different things, and before you know it, you're like, oh, that doesn't look like God. That's God? Really sloppy. Oh, where'd you pick that up? And we start to realize our picture of God is actually, if it doesn't look like Jesus, it doesn't look like God. And Jesus is trying to get us to think more clearly. Sometimes, this is in your notes, sometimes it's the family. Where do we pick this up? Where do we pick up these ideas? Sometimes it's the family. Sometimes, you may be here and you may say, hey, if my parents didn't discipline me the way that they did, I'd have a better view of God. Or you may say, if my spouse was kinder to me, I'd have a better view of God. If my kids were more respectful, whatever it would be, sometimes it's the family. Sometimes it's the family that's saying on God's behalf, we're doing this in the name of God, and then you grow up and you realize that was really not the right thing, and you've picked up some views of God that aren't healthy. Sometimes it's the system. Sometimes it's things outside of your control, and not just outside of your control, things that you can never have control over, okay? Maybe for you, it's like things aren't going right, they haven't gone right. And for you, you're like at work, I can't get a break, and in life, I can't get a break, and it's just hard. And in the middle of all that, you're like, how am I gonna see a good, gracious, loving God in the middle of this system? How am I gonna do that? Sometimes it's the system. Sometimes it's the church, where we pick up bad views of God. Remember Olive Garden? They have this phrase, when you're here, you're family, right? Which is not true, because I'm like, when I'm with my mom and she makes lasagna, she doesn't make me pay for a second plate of lasagna, okay? And I don't have to pay for anything, and she knows exactly what I want. It's not true. The saying's not true. There's all kinds of sayings around that are going to make you feel like, hey, when you're here, like this is the best thing ever. And what we say around here at North Point is this is a safe place to find and follow Jesus. And the reason we say that is because we want you to be able to find Jesus and to be able to have clear ways to follow him. This is why you'll hear things about JXP groups, these Jesus Experience groups. We want you to do this in community. We want to reframe the stories you believe about God and to help you see God more clearly. But we also know you could come here and have a bad experience. We would never want this. We would never want this. We don't want that for anyone. In fact, if you're ever in our staff meetings or you listen to the Riff podcast, you'll hear we do everything we can to try to go, how can we make it so that this is a good representation of what it means to be the people of God reaching out to the city. But we know that you can go to any church and have a bad experience. And we would never want you to equate North Point Church with God. We don't want you to do that. Or any church with God. This is not heaven and we aren't God. We're trying to represent Jesus the best we can. But we realize, whether it's here or other places, you could pick up something that would mess up your view of God at church. And if it's in your family, if your family hasn't given you a picture of God that looks like Jesus, if the system hasn't given you a picture of God that looks like Jesus, if the church hasn't given you a picture of God that looks like Jesus, go back to Jesus, okay? Those things are the flawed things, not Jesus. And this is where it becomes extremely offensive to the highly religious people because they're like, no, but we're doing a really good job. And you're like, no. God receives everyone and anyone at all times, and they're always on his mind. And those three things we talked about are incapable of doing that to the degree that God does. So here's the question. If you saw God clearly, would you run to him or from him? If you saw God clearly, would you run to him or would you run away from him? Let's try to see him a little bit more clearly, okay? Here's a really cool part of the passage that we're gonna go back to. Prodigal. What does prodigal mean? We talked about the definition. If you ask someone, or maybe you thought it meant this, I thought it meant this before, but I thought prodigal meant like lost or wandering or whatever in my mind, but it actually means spends money or resources freely and recklessly. Okay, who's the person in the story that actually is spending the money and giving it away freely and looks reckless before anyone else looks reckless? It's the Father. It's the Father. And then wastefully extravagant. Who's the person in the story that's not just giving a little bit away and saying, hey, why don't you go ahead and try out whatever you want to try out? Here's $1,000, but we're going to hold back. No, wastefully extravagant. It's the Father. Who's the character in the whole entire New Testament that is talked about? And it would be Jesus. And this character, this person of Jesus that actually gives himself away extravagantly and washes feet of someone who's going to betray him the next day, gives his life away for the whole world, even if people don't choose. Yeah, it's God. It's God. It's the prodigal God. The one in the story that's most offensive is actually God, because we have a mixed view of who God is. God gives himself away freely in hopes that it brings us back to him. Why would I run from him? Why would I do that? Well, here's the next question. What are we saying when we run? We're saying, God, I want your stuff, but I don't want you. That's what we're saying. This is what the younger son's saying when the younger son goes to the father and says, Dad, I want your estate. I want you to divide it all up, and I would like this stuff now. He's saying to his dad, you're as good as dead to me. You're as good as dead. I want the type of life I'm going to have when you're not with me. I want all the stuff that you've acquired, but I don't want you. In fact, we don't have any written documents or record of an ancient Near Eastern text of a son requesting an inheritance before the father dies. We don't have any record outside of this one. Isn't that wild? This was not allowed. The people who heard this, they knew what was supposed to be coming was exile, was actually severe discipline, possibly beating of the son, but definitely cutting off from the family. To say you want your father dead? And the word for estate, or in some of the translations would say land, that he gives away, that he sells and then gives to his younger son. That word is where we get the word biology from, because back then what you had was your life. It was everything. Like you're tied up in it. And he's saying, I don't want you. I want your stuff. He would have received a third of the estate and of the property and of all the wealth, and then the older son would have received 2/3. That's how it would have been. And he takes a third of everything the father has ever acquired. If you're a parent in here, you should be going like, there's no way I'd do that, okay? But he takes a third of everything and says, here you go, have it. And he's raised this child. He knows how impulsive this child is, right? Surely he knows what type of a person this child is, how this person's going to spend it, and yet the father's the prodigal, extravagant, gives it away freely. Listen, I don't want to be the type of person, and I don't think any of us do, that we would say that God, if you are real, I believe you are. If you're there and you're the one giving all good things to us, I don't want to take and then not live life with you. The Bible says every good and perfect gift comes from the Father. It comes from God. And when he gives us every good and perfect gift, we probably don't realize that he is behind it all. And he's the one doing it. It's like my kids, when they wake up they don't own anything in the house. They don't own anything in the house. I mean, let me re-emphasize, my kids own nothing in the house, okay? But when they wake up and they turn on their TV in the living room, it's not their TV. Whose TV is it? It's our TV, mine and Lisa's, but for sake of this, I'll just say it's my TV. My TV, okay? When they're like, Dad, where are my Cocoa Puffs? Those aren't your Cocoa Puffs, those are my Cocoa Puffs, but they're in the pantry, third shelf, okay? And if they're like, Dad, if they're like, where's my game? It's not your game, it's my game. Whose bed is it? It's my bed. You see what I'm saying? Like, my kids don't own anything, and I would never just take it all from them. That would be a terrible father to say, until you can pay for it and you can get on payment plan and start paying me for all the things you want, that would never do that. It's just what it means to be a child, is you're just gonna enjoy the goodness of the family. You're gonna enjoy it. And what I have, you have access to. This is the story of the gospel. This is what it means. That to be a child of God is to know, hey, I have access to the Father. I have access to what he gives me. I have breath in my lungs. When you see a beautiful sunrise or a beautiful sunset, and you go, isn't it amazing that's God's behind that. Whenever you meet someone, you see a stranger smile at you, and it makes your day. Whenever someone pays for something in front of you, and Starbucks, whenever every good and perfect gift comes from God. And I don't want to take all that without a relationship with God. What we're saying when we decide to run from God is, I want your stuff, but I don't want you. And here's what's incredible. He's still going to give us his goodness, and he's still going to want relationship. That's what the son was saying. Here's the next question. Why should we return home? This is a big question. This is a big question that the son was pondering. Why should we return home? If you let your need drive you to God, God will meet your deepest need. He had a need. He's sitting among the pigs and going, they're eating better than me. And then he has this thought of, oh, you know what? When even the hired servants of my dad eat better, they're treated better than this. He had this need, this physical need. He had hunger, basic, primitive need that everything has, hunger. Deeper than the physical hunger, though, is this spiritual hunger to be fully known and fully loved. That's the hunger of all of us. You talk to counselors, and you read any sort of book on what it kind of means to be human. This is deep inside of all of us, be fully known and fully loved. If you've ever met someone that's a good friend of yours, and the more they get to know about you, and then the more that they love you, and the more they accept you, you know what that does to your friendship? It brings you tighter, doesn't it? You're like, oh my goodness, the more they know, they're sticking with me. There's this hunger, this need that the son has, but the deepest need that he has is to be accepted. His dad knows him, fully accepted, fully known, and fully loved. And the text shows us that we're gonna have, we'll have needs, right? We'll have need. You may have a need to change your job. You may have a need that you say, my marriage is falling apart. I wish that someone or something would come to help us raise kids, help us in whatever area it is of life. Maybe there's a sickness that you have. There is a need, and then the need beneath the need is to be like, no matter what happens, can I know someone's not gonna run away? Can I know that? And the answer is yes. That is the fulfillment that God gives us, this relationship with God. And here's the irony of it all. He already fully knows you. To be God, he would have to. And what Jesus is saying that's highly offensive to the religious system is, and he fully loves you. I already know you. And I still want you. You see? Deep down, past the needs of the day, is this need that no one can meet. And it's to say, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. The son was like, maybe I can just have this hunger filled if I'm a hired servant. And what you'll learn in later weeks is the father's like, hey, I'm not going anywhere. And he's extravagant again with what he gives him. And then here's the last question. When should I return home? When should I return home? Here's times when we should return home. When we're wounded. And by wounded, I mean that you're spiritually bruised and beating. I mean that even if you say, but I did this to myself, come home. If you say, someone else did this to me, come home. If you say, it's a mix between someone else and myself and I'm very confused, you should come home. If you feel at all like, I feel wounded, I feel like I'm not made whole, I feel like something's broken, you should come home. That's a good time to come home. Frightened, like a child that's asleep at night, that has a nightmare, that you're like, where do I go? Where do I go right now? Go to the Father, come home. If you're wounded, if you're frightened, if you're angry, if you're mad at people, if you're mad at God, if you're mad at yourself, if you can't forgive yourself, come home. Go to God. If you're angry and you're like, yeah, but I'm gonna have to have a discussion with him, have the discussion with him. Go home. Lonely. One of the worst things in the world for the human condition is to feel like you're the only one who feels like the only one. To be in a room like this or to be sitting next to someone and to be like, I don't even feel seen. You are fully known and fully loved. You are not alone in this life, but you should go home if you feel lonely. Empty, if you feel like I have nothing left to give, it's a good time to go home. At whatever place you are, it's a good time to go home. There's an author named Philip Yancey who writes about the prodigal son, kind of rewrites the story of the prodigal son. And I'd like to read it to you. And the story he rewrites, you're going to think, there's some offensive parts in this story. And I want you to stay focused on the right character. See, a young girl grows up on a cherry orchard just above Traverse City, Michigan. Her parents are a bit old-fashioned, tend to overreact to her nose ring, the music she listens to, and the length of her skirts. And I know some of you are like, I grew up in that household. They ground her a few times, and she seethes inside. I hate you, she thinks. She screams at her father when he knocks on the door of her room after an argument, and that night, she acts on a plan she has mentally rehearsed scores of times. She runs away. She's visited Detroit only once before on a bus trip with her church youth group, and she knew that her parents wouldn't go find her there. There's drugs, there's violence in downtown Detroit, and she concluded, I'm not going to California or Florida, I'm going to Detroit. Her second day there, she meets a man who drives the biggest car she's ever seen. He offers her a ride, buys her lunch, and arranges a place for her to stay. He gives her some pills that make her feel better than she's ever felt before. She was right all along, she decides. Her parents have been keeping her from all the fun. This good life of hers continues for a month, 2 months, a year, and the man with the big car, she calls him boss now. He teaches her a few things. She lives in a penthouse and orders room service whenever she wants. Occasionally, she thinks of the folks back home, but they're so boring in her mind, she can hardly believe she grew up there. She has a brief scare one night when she sees a picture printed on a flyer with the headline, "Have you seen this child?" It's a picture of her. But by now, she has blonde hair and all of her makeup on, body piercings, jewelry everywhere. Nobody would mistake her for a child. Besides, runaways in Detroit never squeal. And then one night, she's laying down and she hears footsteps. And as she hears footsteps of a man coming to her room, she has a flashback of her golden retriever in Traverse City, Michigan, running across her lap. God, why did I ever leave? She says to herself, my dog is treated better than I am. Well, then her thoughts go back and forth, and she makes 3 phone calls home, and the first 2 phone calls go straight to voicemail. The third one does as well. And when she calls home the third time, she leaves the voicemail. She says, Mom and Dad, I'm gonna come through Detroit on a bus tomorrow at midnight, and if I don't see you there, I'll just stay on the bus and I'll go to Canada. I just wanna let you know. So she jumps on this bus and she starts to see signs for Traverse City, and she starts to get nervous. She gets there. She walks off the bus. She walks into the terminal not knowing what to expect. Not one of the 1,000 scenes that have played out in her mind prepares her for what she sees. There, in the concrete walls and the plastic chairs of the bus terminal, stand a group of 40 brothers and sisters, great aunts and uncles, cousins, and even a grandma. And taped across the entire wall of the terminal is a banner that says, Welcome home. Out of the crowd of cheers and all the well-wishers is her dad. She can see her dad. She stares through her eyes, or through her tears. She starts the memorized speech that she had on the bus, and her dad interrupts her with a hug and says, Shh, we have no time for apologies. We have a party for you at home. Let's go home. At the end of time, when you stand before God, imagine him asking you, did you believe I loved you? I don't know what you think God will say whenever you come face to face with him, but imagine him asking you, did you believe I loved you? And you don't have to wait till that day. You can now be thinking of this true question that Jesus gets at through his whole life. Do you believe I love you? Do you believe I love you? Do you believe I love you? This is Tony. Tony plays the guitar really well. You may not know him, but you can now say hi to Tony in the lobby. There's something about all the musicians up here that might surprise you. They have these things called in-ears, okay? And they're listening to a track, and they're listening to a guide, and they're listening to a beat that's gonna keep them all together. So, in fact, Cage, can you throw in the house what Tony's hearing right now? And you're like, that's annoying. I feel you. Just wait till the voice comes in, and the voice will be like, chorus, verse. See? That's what they're hearing. Now let's go back to what we normally hear. Yeah, this is what you normally hear. When you come in and you hear the band playing, and they're all playing together, and you show up and you're like, wow, yeah, it really draws me into Jesus. It really draws me towards God. Let's go back to what they're actually hearing. Let's do that one more time. They're hearing this. Now, it doesn't mean they're not worshiping God too, okay? They're worshiping too, but they've learned how to continually hear a guide and to show up in a room and draw people to God. They've learned that. Let's go back to the non-annoying one, just him playing the guitar here. What if the click track in your ears, what if the guide in your ears is this? Do you believe I love you? That, hey, we have a big game tonight. I'm sure you're going to say some words that you did not plan on saying in church today. Whatever it goes, I don't know what's going to happen. It all depends on how it ends, right? When you make mistakes, what if the voice, the click track in your head is, do you believe I love you? Do you believe I love you? Do you believe I love you? Because he does. What if when you think about mistakes you made in the past, it's the click track, do you believe I love you? Let's go home. Let's pray together. Thank you, Jesus, for telling this story, risking your life to do it all, and then giving your life, not just risking, giving it for us that we may see it's not just a story, but because you're God, that you have now showed us you'll give yourself away freely for the hope of a relationship with us. Thank you for that. May we always hear the voice, do you believe I love you? God, I pray for those who feel far from you. May they feel your presence. And I pray for those who think that we're close, but sometimes our self-righteousness gets in the way. May we also feel your love. It's in Jesus' name. Amen. May that click track continue, and may you show up in the world as someone who has received the grace of God and gives that grace away freely. It's gonna be a great series talking about chasing the ring. I want to go ahead and pass it to our hosts, Mart and Terrell.
Thank you, Preston.
Thank you.
And I don't know, if you didn't cry during that last story, you just didn't have a daughter then.
I don't have a daughter, but it did make me tear up.
Okay, I like it.
So you all have a connection card that's right on your seats. So I would just love if you all just filled it out for me. I know for me, my next step that I put down is I will ensure that God, I want you and not just your stuff. Preston made a good point where he said, what are we saying when we run? God, I want your stuff, but I don't want you. And that was me for like the first 20 years of my life. Just wanted everything that God could like offer, but not want an intimate relationship with him. So when I made that decision just to go all in and just want him, my life changed.
All of that. And I know for all of us, we all have that next step, right? So this is our opportunity to partner with you. We want to resource you. If you'd fill this out, then we can connect and be able to do that. And I think that's pretty cool too. We've got something else. I know Preston mentioned this a couple times in message, something called JXP groups. They're groups, okay? And if you're looking for community, maybe you're here for the first time, maybe you're here for the 100th time, and you're like, I just feel like I'm not super connected to people here. Let's change that.
Yeah.
Let's get you connected, okay? I'm biased. I think we got some good community here. And we had, so many leaders last week step up and say, hey, I'm ready to lead a group. We trained them. We walked through that process and what that looks like. If you're interested in hopping in one of those groups, just write groups, write JXP, whatever you want on this card. Mm-hmm. We'll make sure to shoot you an email tomorrow with all the information on how to take that next step, get signed up for a group, and get plugged into some awesome community.
And they may be in mine. You just never know. You just
I
never
don't know. Don't pick Terrell's.
And another next step could be baptism. Baptism is like you just going public with your faith, like taking that next step and saying, man, hey, God, I just want to go public with it. And baptism is Super Bowl weekend, 2 weeks.
Puppy Bowl weekend.
Yeah. Okay, Puppy Bowl and Super Bowl weekend. Same weekend.
They're the same. Super Bowl weekend, Puppy Bowl weekend in our Kid Point area, and Baptism weekend are all the same, okay, in a couple weeks. And again, that's just, absolutely, if you're saying, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus, but I've never made that decision to go public to celebrate what baptism, celebrate what God's done in my life. Hey, baptism is really one of those first steps. And if you haven't done that, that's your next step. So, hey, there's also something, as we're talking about next steps, that's right on your connection card as well, in your seat. And it's like a red little card, and it's got like 4 questions in it. Yeah, it's got 4 questions on it. Okay, you don't even need to write your name. But this is, if you'd fill that out, okay, that'd be extremely helpful for us. One of the things that we always want to do is we're committed to resourcing our community here at North Point. We want to make sure that we're sending out helpful resources, that we're figuring out new ways to give new resources. So one of the ways that we need to do that is we need to know where our community is at. So if you'd fill out that little card, that'd give us a good idea of kind of collectively where we're all at, so we can develop the right kind of resources for this community. So that'd be super helpful. But I'm not gonna make you do that. You don't have to put your name. You can put Terrell's name on there if you want.
You can.
It doesn't matter.
That's
okay.
fine.
You can pick your favorite Chiefs
like
player and put it on there. Yeah. But hey, I also want to invite our ushers forward. This is also our opportunity to give, and I want to say thank you for investing in North Point. It does not go unnoticed, and when you give to North Point, you're truly giving through North Point to our Dream Center, to our community partners. One of the things you read, a lot of those stories of students and the lives that are being changed in our student area, I mean, your giving directly affects that as well. And so I want to say thank you so much. Also, I know I've met a couple first-time guests here. So I want to make sure to be super clear on this. This is not where we guilt you into giving to us, okay? But this is our opportunity where if you, that connection card that I blabbed about for like 5 minutes, okay? If you take this, right, and you just mark that first-time guest box, we want to make a donation in your honor to a local nonprofit. So just by showing up today, you can know you made a difference in somebody's life. I think that's pretty cool. So ushers, you can go ahead and pass the buckets. We can drop our cards, our giving, our, what are those things, surveys, in the buckets. While we do that, let's check out a little post-game press conference from Preston.
All right, what a game. I'm glad that you all were here, and some of you are like, what are we watching? I don't know, this is North Point, but we got a lot of things that for box seats or whether in the back seats, you're gonna experience probably the same thing. And I think what threw us all off with today's play was the trick play that Jesus had when he's talking about the prodigal. We're like, is it prodigal son? No, prodigal God. We didn't see that coming. Jesus, the original Andy Reid, just all these trick plays trying to throw us off. Speaking of Andy Reid, he drinks apple cider. This is one of our sponsors. Now, if you haven't drank apple cider because you're worried about your health, don't worry. This says old-fashioned, natural goodness, gluten-free, which means it's healthy. It's healthy. Just shake it up. It gets a little cloudy if you let it sit there. One more sponsor before questions. WD-40. I don't know what to say. I'm a little rusty. WD-40 gets rid of rust. Spray it and it won't squeak anymore. But let's go to questions now. First question, Trent Krim with The Independent.
Yeah, what would you say to anyone who was maybe a little disappointed today when they realized Jeremy was out?
Trent, nobody was more disappointed than me. I don't even know where he was today. Next question.
Yeah, it was an interesting offense you were running. We get used to Jeremy running the I formation or maybe a wing, but you believe a little bit more in the spiritual formation. Can you talk about that?
I formation's not bad, rock formation's not bad, ab formation's just impossible at this point in my life, so I went with spiritual formation. That's just what I believe in. Shameless plug, join a JXP group. All right, next question.
So your title is Spiritual Formations Director. Does that mean that you can confirm the existence of ghosts?
You not heard the Holy Ghost. There's a Holy Ghost. I would think there are unholy ghosts too. We want to get in this now? Or we could just wait till the next time I speak at North Point. We'll just talk about that. But yeah, next question.
Is it true that Jeremy wrote this message for you?
You know what? Even if it is true, it's the delivery. And Jeremy definitely didn't deliver this message. Perhaps his ghost was here. Next question.
Yeah, how long did it take you to get here in your DeLorean?
Yeah, that's enough questions.
Stupid.
All right, could you all stand with us, please? And with the apple cider and vinegar, if you ever want to lose weight, drink both of those together. It's worked for me. And it also kills nets. All right, we love you. We'll see you all next week.
Go Chiefs.